Good evening, it's Sunday night and you are watching the Modise Network. Ombudsman Professor Malegapuru Mkoba joins us as he reflects on the Life Esidimeni tragedy. How did things go so fatally wrong? He will be sharing his thoughts on the overall state of healthcare in South Africa. Also in the program, Parliament's Scopa Chair, Tim Modise, uncovers the level of financial crises that government departments and SOEs are really facing. Welcome. The Life Esidimeni investigations have been concluded with the chairperson of the Arbitration Commission, Judge Modise, awarding damages to the affected families. The tragedy that claimed 144 lives was uncovered by the Health Ombud Professor Malegapuru Mkoba following complaints filed by NGOs on behalf of the families.
It's not my first language, by the way.
Yes, neither is it mine, ma'am. Did you do anything wrong in this project? Is that what you're saying?
I did my utmost best. When I found out the people have died,
Yes.
I approached the ombudsperson and everything else that comes after that. I did my best to try and...
Well, the question is a little more pointed than that, Ms. Matlango, is in your conduct, is there anything that you identify as blameworthy? In other words, where you did something that you ought to carry blame for? That's what counsel is trying to get at. To say,
Sorry, Justice.
yes, the counsel is asking that, is there anything for which you will carry blame, given all these events? And she says, aside from the political accountability which you have rightly and correctly assumed, is there any deed or action on your part which, when you think again, you accept that it was attracts blame?
In taking political responsibility, Justice, my belief is that it's the realization on my part that a lot has gone wrong. That is the blame I'm taking.
Well, that's the former MEC for Health in Gauteng, Katani Mahlangu. But Professor Mkoba joins me to talk about his experiences investigating the Life Esidimeni tragedy. He'll also be sharing observations on the healthcare system in South Africa at the moment. And Prof, a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Tim.
I will go back to that clip in a moment, but I noticed that you're wearing a keffiyeh this evening.
Yes, I am.
Yeah? Any message or story or you're telling, or it's just a fashion statement you're making tonight?
Well, it's just a good piece of cloth to wear, but when I first was drawn attention to this, it was in my early political career when I saw the late Yasser Arafat wearing it, and this is his trademark sort of keffiyeh.
Yeah.
And I sort of admired him so much throughout his political career that I decided one day I will try and honor him.
Okay.
Anyway, so
well,
that's my statement.
That's your statement so far. I thought it had something bigger than that, but it's a story for another time.
Yeah.
When you saw the MEC for Health in Gauteng make the statement that she made, and thinking back to the investigations that you had conducted, what went through your mind?
Well, what went through my mind was what I experienced, that no one wanted to take accountability of what had happened. And I found that extraordinary, especially the senior people under whom many other people were functioning and operating, that they could not take personal responsibility. And I say this because when you apply for a job and when you are appointed to a job, you are not appointed on the basis of a collective. You are appointed on a basis of specific responsibilities that are yours. And when things go wrong, you know, the chips should fall on you. They cannot revert to a collective that is often amorphous and not obvious as to who the people are. And I found this constant reference to collective responsibility actually a distortion of the law or the natural laws of any country, that you could actually allow people to die and say this was a collective death. I thought it was most extraordinary. The lack of accountability of the senior people in that department,
Sure.
and they continue to do so.
But I suppose, you know, I mean, we have the Constitution, we've got human rights, we've got the norms, we've got the standards and the obligations on the part of the citizens. But to see people who depended on the state for their care being treated in this fashion, that must have been shocking to you. Is that what you anticipated when you started your investigations?
No, I didn't anticipate that the people would hide behind this collective thing. I thought that people would tell me the truth, and then people would take responsibility, and it would make it easier for the alternative dispute resolution, because part of the reason why I recommended that process was I didn't want people there to be adversarial. You know, when you go to a court of law, you want to win a case. When you go into an arbitration, you want to discuss and be understood. And I was hoping that that process would generate that discussion. And in fairness, I think Justice Moseneke tried to create that sort of climate for people to discuss, to be understood, rather than for people to rush to the courts and start fighting each other as to who will win and who will lose the case.
Let me just get our viewers to understand what your role was and what your role is as Health Ombud, and compare yours to that of Judge Dikgang Moseneke. What was your role in all of this?
Well, my role is that of receiving complaints of people that have been against, I think, the systematic abuse of the health system, either by the health professional or the establishments or any other general maladministration that affects health. I'm supposed to do that work independently, fearlessly, without prejudice, and the other sort of words that we use in South Africa, you know, without fear, prejudice, and favor. So that's what I do. And in fairness, I think when I was given this task, I tried to do that. I was not going to allow anybody to try and influence me. They did try, but they didn't succeed.
But now, at the end of the day, we hear of 144 victims and probably still counting. I'm not sure what the number could be. You may have the estimates.
No. I think from my office, we have stopped counting. I think at the time when I released the report, I had about 94. But I already had a sense that there were more, and I just needed to verify that, because, you know, as you have just seen recently, a Russian journalist claimed to have been killed, and he appeared a couple of days afterwards. So I didn't want to be part of that kind of story where I say somebody has died, and then suddenly they appear, and you know, I would be, obviously my reputation would be in tatters.
Sure.
But I had to make sure, I think through various lines of investigation, to ensure that people were actually deceased and they died once, because even when I was receiving information, some people had 2 dates of death, and I had to decide which one it is through investigations. So it was painstaking, but it was worthwhile. Yeah.
Let's look at how the whole matter was handled from the time you got involved, right? And the role played by the NGOs who came to you and said investigate, following the complaints by the families. And I'm sure there are families that also approached you directly.
Well, no. There were about 13 families that approached me through Section 27.
Yes.
And they brought all the documents, and that's how the case actually was locked into my system. It was locked through Section 27, and then the minister came, you know, to corroborate that I think this was an urgent national issue I needed to investigate, and I had to prioritize it. And, you know, when I took the job on the 1st of June, I was really looking forward to, you know, to investigate in simple case of Tim Modise, Mkoba, and so forth. I didn't think that I would be dealing with multiple complex cases that have involved almost a systematic way in which people were allowed to die.
So in a sense, this was avoidable from your point of view.
Yeah.
It's something that should not have happened.
No. It should, in a normal society, a democratic society, and a society that claims to have a basis of human rights, a caring constitution, and then you have this. I mean, it's a great embarrassment.
Now, you made the investigations, made the findings that you did, and came up with the recommendations, which included the arbitration process that was headed by the former Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke. So the way the whole matter of arbitration was approached, what did you think? On the one side, for instance, the Gauteng government set aside 40 million rands for possible damages, and as we know, the chairperson awarded much more than that.
Well, look, I think nobody could do it better than Justice Moseneke. As he himself said, you know, I had produced a report like a scientist, and he put the legal terminology to it. So it was really rephrasing the report in a language of law that allowed, I think, the process to go the way I think it went. And as you can see from his arbitration, he referred almost extensively to the findings of the report as to how solid it was and how scientific it was and how meaningful it was. But remember that there were 18 recommendations that were made, and some of those were really of constitutional nature, because the Constitution also created this situation where it disproportionately awarded the power of health in the province against the national minister. So people kept on saying, where was Dr. Motsoaledi? Dr. Motsoaledi could not be anywhere because the Constitution did not allow him. And when you looked at the National Health Act and look at the previous act of the apartheid era, where the national minister had the power, those powers had been taken away in the new dispensation given to the provinces. And that's why in one of my questions to the MEC was, why was the minister not informed? And she was pointed to me and said, well, I did not need to inform him. This falls within my sphere of governance. And she was right, because that's what's in the Constitution. So one of my recommendations was that really the Constitution and the National Health Act should be re-looked at and give more powers to the national minister to prevent incidences such as this from happening. With the dislocation of the allocation of powers between the provinces and I'm sure even the municipalities, and now maybe with the national government.
Now, as I mentioned, that there was 40 million rand set aside, and Judge Moseneke awarded the damages the way he did, but today it's revealed through the DA's Jack Bloom that 160 million rands or thereabouts is now going to be found from other departments of the province to award about 160 million rands. What's your view of that?
Well, look, I think Justice Moseneke actually did a careful study. He called actuaries to come and assist him. I mean, I attended some of their presentation. So this was not just something he thugged from his thumbs. He actually did a thorough investigation. He applied the law, applied the Constitution, but also applied scientific facts to what needed to be awarded. And I think he was still minimalist, but you know, that's what he came across as the best, I think, solution for the problem. Remember that it was also a groundbreaking award, I think, to this kind of process. So I think I'm quite satisfied that he did justice, I think, to what is really a tragic, I think.
Well, you are a medical professional, a teacher, a leader, and now health ombud, and you saw what the victims, if one may call them that, and the affected families, what they went through. What were your impressions of the bureaucracy as well as the political system? What you had to go through yourself as this prominent person who holds this position, and you think about what happened to ordinary folk who are trying to engage the very system?
Well, I mean, for the victims and for the families, they really went through a harrowing period. I mean, some of them, you know, when they were giving evidence to me, they were crying all the time. I could understand that. And in fact, one of the recommendations was they should be cancelled, and they should be cancelled for a very long time, because some of them are not going to recover, you know, for a very long time, even after this arbitration award. So for the victims, I think it was partly a relief that they could talk to someone. But they've been going through almost like 3 years before they came to speak to me. So this had been going on for a long time. And in fact, they didn't even trust that I would do anything. They thought that I'd been hired, you know, to come and cover up for the government. And I kept on telling them, I'm just doing my work. Please give me a chance so that I can come up with my findings rather than telling me that I'm just a smoke screen for the MEC, for the HOD, and so forth and so forth. So their trust was very, very low. But nevertheless, I think we went through it quite well. Some of the officials, I think, felt very traumatized, especially in the Department of Health, the Mental Directorate. Some of the deputy directors were traumatized. Some of them were crying, I think, giving evidence, because they realized what wrong had occurred, but they also felt they did not have the power.
So which tells us then that there were officials anyway within the system, within the department, who were aware that what they were instructed to do was wrong. Is it?
They all knew that, yes. I mean, they testified that even in front of Justice Museneke. They knew what was happening was wrong, but they felt that they had no power. They were fearful of their, as they called them, their principals or their leaders. And they were contributing to this so-called collective responsibility that makes no sense to anybody, you know. So that's really, yeah, quite a number of, I think I interviewed 25 people from the department. I didn't meet anybody who was not fearful, maybe except two.
Fearful of?
Fearful of the MEC, fearful of the HOD, fearful of the Director of Mental Health at the time. They were all fearful of them.
Professor Malegapuru Mkoba is the Health Ombud and our guest on the program. You can also send in your comments and questions at #Modise Network. We will be looking at other hospitals and clinics, the state of healthcare throughout South Africa when we return.